Hello and welcome to this Affidavit of Accusation by myself, Peter Andrew of the Nolan family, against Chris Roubis. In this video presentation, you will witness the reading into the public record and thereby into a record for any court that may be convened should Chris Roubis force this matter to go to court, my Affidavit of Accusation against Chris Roubis. Chris Roubis has been slandering me in a number of places for quite some time, and now that we have created our common law courts and called into existence our common law courts for the Men's Business Association, it is time to process Chris Roubis' case through the due process of law for the common law courts for MBA Law Services. Fundamentally, Chris Roubis gets the opportunity to respond to my Affidavit of Accusation. So the first approach under the Law Services approach is to actually issue a formal Affidavit of Accusation under penalty of perjury and full commercial liability. And that is what this is. This is me reading into the public record under oath and penalty of perjury and full commercial liability my accusations against Chris Roubis. It is up to Chris Roubis to respond to this accusation, and he has until the end of April 2013, that's about 22 days, 3 weeks, to respond to this accusation. That is more than enough time to respond to a formal accusation under a new set of courts and a new jurisdiction. So without further ado, I will cut to the video of me reading into the record my accusations against Chris Roubis under oath and penalty of perjury. Thank you very much for listening. Hello and welcome to this reading into the public record, the Affidavit of Accusation by the man calling himself Peter Andrew of the Nolan family, myself, against the man calling himself Chris Roubis. There will be an introduction to this video, and so this will simply be a straight reading of this affidavit. Thank you very much for listening. From the man commonly called Peter Andrew of the Nolan family, standing in God's kingdom, in care of Instant Business Intelligence, 17 C.A. Rossetti, 2nd District, Bucharest, Romania. Fax and email address supplied. 2. Lawful notice to respondent, the human being calling himself Chris Roubis, believed to reside in Maroubra, but current address unknown. He has a website, chrisroubis.com.au, and this is the 8th of April 2013. Explanatory notes. To the public who may be reading this Affidavit of Accusation and not know what is happening. The so-called courts of law in Australia are a criminal cartel meant to make slaves of the Australian people. This has been well proven, and the evidence is presented on the Crimes Against Fathers Australia website for anyone who would like to determine the veracity of that statement for themselves. In the face of the criminality of the courts and the government, I, Peter Andrew of the Nolan family, and my colleagues have made efforts over the last 5 years to introduce new and proper courts of law into Australia so as to reintroduce the rule of law in Australia. My colleagues and I have received little support from the common Australian people, who seem to prefer to remain ignorant of the situation in which they find themselves, rather than to educate themselves on this matter. By such willful ignorance, most Australians have waived any right to have any say in how those of us who have been risking our lives propose to reintroduce the rule of law onto the land known as Australia. If you wanted a say, you were well advised to speak sooner. In April 2011, new courts were proclaimed into existence with 29 signatures on the proclamation. The prerequisite needed was 25. These courts were nominally called the People's Courts of Australia. It was expected that soon after a secretary for the People's Courts of Australia in Sydney would be found and we could begin running our first cases. As matters transpired, no man came forward to fill this position of secretary for fear of persecution by the criminals in the government. Eventually a man came forward to fill this position in Melbourne. Since I was being slandered by one Chris Roubis who lives in Victoria, I decided to run the first case of the People's Courts of Australia in Melbourne, and for Chris Roubis, a very simple slander case was to be the test case. It is an open and shut case. Chris Roubis does not deny slandering me. Okay, I must admit an error here. This was for Chris Merritt. However, Chris Roubis has been slandering me in Sydney, and so he's going to have this case. This is meant to say Chris Merritt. My apologies. Having been signed and dated, I will leave the error in there and apologise for the error. However, ASIO, who I will remind you are your servants, whom you pay with your tax dollars, making you their master and responsible for their actions, decided to pay a visit to our First Secretary and harass and intimidate him. Since so little support was forthcoming from the Australian public for this man, he has well-founded fears for his freedom. Other men have been jailed, Ian Henke, for example. Based on this harassment and intimidation, I am now launching the Men's Business Association Law Services, which offers the MBA Law Courts as a service. The MBA Law Services is a global service and operates in natural law and common law jurisdictions. If you want to know more, there is a lengthy video on this link, and the link is shown. You may go watch that video should you so please. As the founder of the Men's Business Association, I claim the right to allow MBA law courts to operate in such a way that the jury members and secretary can remain anonymous to the public, so long as all evidence is presented to the public for review. In this way, the veracity of the jury trial process can be maintained in the face of the clear criminality of the Australian federal government, particularly the secret police thugs who go by the general name of ASIO. You, as a member of the public, are invited to observe this process so that you too are sure that the due process of law was followed and that Chris Roubis was given a fair trial. The purpose of this process is to ensure the due process of law is followed and that Chris Roubis gets a fair trial. The only way to do that is to do it in the open view of the public and not risk the lives of those who are brave enough to be jury members or secretary of the courts. So, lawful notice to respondent. The human being calling himself Chris Roubis, believed to reside in Maroubra, but current address unknown. He has a website, chrisroubis.com.au, and it is the 8th of April 2013. So, let right be done, though the heavens may fall. Notice to principal is notice to agent. Notice to agent is notice to principal. I, commonly addressed by the calling of Peter Andrew of the Nolan family, or Joshua Brandon of the Baum family, hereinafter referred to as principal, in my correct public capacity as beneficiary to the original jurisdiction, being of majority in age, competent to testify, a self-realized and free sentient man, my yes be yes, my no be no, do state the truths and facts herein are of first-hand personal knowledge, true, correct, complete. Not just true and correct, certain and not misleading, so help me God. This notice is addressed to the human being calling himself Chris Roubis, hereinafter also referred to as the respondent. Affidavit with respect to the crime of slander committed against the man known as Peter Andrew of the Nolan family. Item 1. Principal is of legal age and competent to testify. Item 2. Principal has first-hand knowledge of the facts stated herein. Item 3. Principal makes oath that in approximately late 2011, a Facebook profile in the calling of Chris Roubis started making slanderous comments about me on Facebook. I wondered who this person might be, as I had never heard of him. He also consistently used my calling and name in the public, having been noticed that my calling and name were copyrighted, and I had denied him consent to use my name and calling. Item 4. Principal makes oath that he is in the sincere belief that Chris Roubis runs a site called New South Wales Police Crime. On this site was posted the following on Wednesday the 13th, 2011. Wednesday, July 13th, 2011. The address is there. It may no longer be visible. He may take it down. It is visible today, 2013, 8th of April. Peter Nolan, psychopath, sociopath. by Peter Nolan on Wednesday, July 13th. So he's obviously faked my name there. But no matter the subject of the post, Mr. Nolan always blunders in and hijacks the topic with his demented hatred of women again and again. However, we're happy to report that most of the readership are not automatons. Loopy Pete is copping plenty of flack, and we think it would be safe to bet that he will soon be banished from the spearhead, as he has been from every other forum he has imposed himself upon, at least those he has not shut down due to intervention of the Australian Federal Police. Anyway, here's an insightful summation of Peter Nolan's gibberish, which Peter has chosen not to respond to, which proves he is right, doesn't it, Mr. Nolan? So, Chris Roubis runs this site, in my sincere belief. He is free to deny that under penalty of perjury and full commercial liability, should he choose. He's called me a psychopath and a sociopath on that site, which is untrue. Okay? So here are some other comments from some other people, which were then copied across. Love the Desert, May 30, 2011, 10:33, to Peter Nolan. Your insane ramblings have ruined this place. Why did people respond to your posts? Morons. This place would be so much better if everybody just gave him thumbs down and hit his post. They are effing worthless gibberish. I always scroll right past them. Please, Peter, shut the hell up about common law garbage. Apparently the entire system of law in the English-speaking world is garbage, according to this person. So it tells you the intellectual capacity of these people. Shut the hell up about common law garbage. We heard you the first effing time. Enough already. Branch out. Talk about something else. Nobody gives a crap. Apparently they don't give a crap about the reintroduction of the rule of law. I've been lurking here for a while, and I've watched how every thread he enters degenerates into some bullshit crap about, quote, common law, unquote, and he insults us for not educating ourselves about this common law shit, and he pulls out this common law shit that he pulls out of his delusional fat ass. Sounds like Chris Merritt talking, doesn't it? Here in America, you F-wit pan, your common law shit doesn't even apply. I seriously doubt it applies in your home country, but that's beside the point. You're just completely insane, delusional, psychotic, stupid, and dumb. Funny, given that common law does apply in America. The guy sounds like a real Jared Lee Lerner before he went crazy and shot a dozen people in Arizona. Pan, I know you are a crazy effing idiot and you will refuse to educate yourself on this matter, being the slave you are to your defective brain. But you really should seek professional help. Just let go of the anger, for heaven's sake. And, you know, that gets 166 upvotes is what this means. Okay? Which shows you how foolish people are. Love the Desert, May 30, 2011. I was hoping to come here and find a real nice post about finding work in the context of Women's Nation, but once again it got derailed by Pan and a few people who'd rather talk about David Icke, New World Order, the Illuminati, and whatever else common law garbage that Peter has no effing clue about. How sad how much he and others have totally effing ruined this place. Okay, 64 upvotes for that from the ignorant masses. Love the Desert, so same person. So Chris Roubis has said he's putting a cross-selection of comments, but he's put comments of just one person, who is obviously a fool. Peter, you come across as a self-promoting pathological liar. I mean, what haven't you done? I guess you haven't single-handedly saved the Queen from the Joker, but you've done everything else and you've probably got the credentials to prove it. Of course, it's all in your head. Okay, 61 likes for that. And then by Illuminati Ingrid, who is a known ASIO agent, at least one of the guys that writes for the Spearhead thinks that Nolan is a real problem and should be banned from the Spearhead. That's pretty damning. Oh, one person's opinion is damning. W.F. Price, the head of Spearhead, says that they haven't banned Nolan because the Spearhead's lawyer says that the only way to prove that the Spearhead doesn't endorse Nolan's insanity is by not moderating his comments or banning him. If I was Mr. Price, I would get a second opinion, because this sounds absurd. Illuminati Ingrid said, yes, we are bemused by Mr. Price's logic. Maybe he's getting free legal advice from Mr. Nolan, where he continues to spam his nasty views towards women. Another comment, now I find Peter Nolan has decided to post defamatory stories about me on his forums here. and they've posted the comment to the Peter Nolan Psychopath blogspot.com. Okay, so this was on New South Wales police crime, and just to prove that it was there, I will hit pause and go to it. So here is the Crimes Against Fathers site, and here is the post in question. You can see it here. It is in grey on black, so not particularly easy to read, but you can see it's exactly what I said. And to prove that it is currently on the site, here it is, currently on the site. Today is the 2013-04-08, the 8th of April 2013. This is currently on the site. If you want, I'll just prove that. Here is the clock from my computer, untainted, 1832, April 2013. And here is the append, Peter Nolan, psychopath. Here you can see it's white on grey. So, you know, this is posted quote by Peter Nolan, which is obviously faked, and you know, claiming that I'm a psychopath and sociopath on a website that is, in my sincere belief, maintained by Chris Roubis, because Chris Roubis slandered other people on this site. It is up to Chris Roubis to deny that he maintains this site. So, item 5, principal makes oath that he is not a psychopath or sociopath, and this public characterization of being such constitutes the crime of slander. Principal makes oath that Chris Roubis ran a website called www.chrisroubis.com. This website was used to slander Principal. One example of this slander follows. You can see chrisroubis.com, and you can see the slander there. I will just blow this page up for you so you can see it clearly. Here is the page blown up fully. You can see chrisroubis.com. You can see Chris Roubis exposes Peter Nolan's Crimes Against Fathers site. You can see the text there, and I'm going to dictate this text to you in just a second. You can see that he's trying to advertise books and things like that, and trying to make money off this site. So he's using slander about me to try and make money for himself. Okay? Generate traffic to his site to make money for himself. That's what he's doing. To make sure the reader can properly read the text of this page, the text is repeated below. Quote, another website created by the psychotic Peter Andrew Nolan, crimesagainstfathers.com, is spreading woman hatred and defaming men as manginas that do not approve of hitting women and children. I and many others have had arguments with psychotic Peter Nolan about his delusions about abuse towards women, but Peter Nolan resorts to becoming vindictive and defaming us on his websites. Peter Nolan hijacks all Australian political Facebook groups with his delusional views. Anyone that disagrees with Peter Nolan will become his enemy and be defamed on his websites with ridiculous stories about them. So far, Peter Nolan has been banned from 6 Australian political groups on Facebook that I know of, and the number is growing. Peter Nolan is desperate for an army of followers to do his bidding here in Australia, since he fled from Australia for domestic violence. Peter Nolan uses many aliases in forums and groups on the internet to spread his vile beliefs towards women and to gather men across the globe for his cause. Peter Nolan's followers are just a few, thank God. No one is psychotic enough to follow a man like him. I accuse Chris Roubis of either writing those words or approving those words on chrisroubis.com. He's welcome to deny that. Item 7. Principal makes oath on the following points, rebutting this slander on the public record and to the jury. So those were the comments made by Chris Roubis. This is my rebuttal under oath, penalty of perjury and full commercial liability being presented to you, the jury, and to the public should they wish to listen. 1. Principal is not psychotic. 2. Principal has never spread, quote, woman hatred. The fact that many people tell that lie does not make it true. 3. Principal has never defamed men as manginas on the basis that they do not approve of hitting women and children. 4. Principal does not resort to, quote, becoming vindictive and defaming us on his websites, unquote. The truth can never be defamation or slander. It is, in all cases, lawful to speak the truth. It is indeed men like Chris Roubis and Chris Merritt who stoop to the crime of slander because they have no arguments to present to the public as to the matters I am presenting. 5. Principal has never hijacked an Australian political Facebook. Indeed, if Principal had hijacked said Facebooks, how could the argument Principal has been banned from 6 such Facebooks be true? 6. It is not the case that anyone who disagrees with Principal becomes my enemy and is defamed on my websites with ridiculous stories about them. 7. Just scrolling down. 7. Principal has not been banned from 6 Australian political groups on Facebook. If Chris Roubis would like to make this claim, then he can name them. I was banned from 2 Australian political Facebooks, the Australian Sovereignty Party and the Australian Patriots Party. I was banned on the basis that I proposed these parties would be well advised to form new courts of law and hold women accountable for their crimes on an equal before the law basis to men, meaning the very fact that so-called political parties ban someone for proposing women are held equal before the law clearly demonstrates these political parties do not have the agenda of equal before the law, no matter how much they protest that they do. Principal notes that both, quote, political parties, unquote, have at no time suggested that women be held accountable for their crimes, have at no time suggested the creation of new courts of law, and have been totally ineffective in their supposed efforts in the nearly 2 years since I was banned from them. 8. Principal is not desperate for an army of followers. I have on many occasions told men I do not want any followers because I recommend that men lead themselves and do not follow anyone. 9. Principal did not flee Australia for any accusations, false or otherwise, with respect to domestic violence. 10. Principal does not use many aliases in forums and groups on the internet. I did use Global Man and one other for some time until the criminal Michael Toll linked me to the Global Man persona in October 2010. So when this comment was made, I was using no false aliases. Since then, I have not used any alias at all to present what I have to say. 11. There are now some 400 men registered to CAF sites around the world, and that number is slowly growing. Men are starting to realise just how badly they are criminally victimised. I have just under 400 people on my personal emailing list. The CAF site is now, in March, CAF got 107,000 page views with about 8,000 unique IP addresses in those page views. Some of them, in fact a good number of them, will be web crawlers, but that's hardly no support or no readers. So Chris Roubis made some claims on chrisroubis.com. Chris Roubis is welcome to prove all the claims he made on an affidavit of reply. He made claims, I just rebutted them. He's welcome to present some proof of those claims. If he does not present some proof of those claims, he accepts that those claims were false. Item 8. Principal makes oath that based on all the above evidence, plus a great deal more evidence that can be presented if wished, Principal formally and irrevocably accuses Chris Roubis of 2 crimes. My mistake, of 2 crimes. 1. At least 10 counts of copyright violation for the use of my name, calling, and image in many public places over an extended period of time while being fully aware that my name, calling, and image are copyrighted materials. 2. At least 2 counts of slander, namely the crime of telling known and deliberate lies about a man with the intention of causing injury, harm, and loss. So I accused Chris Roubis of slandering me on the New South Wales police crime site and of slandering me on the chrisroubis.com site. So 2 counts of slander. Okay? Chris Roubis can decide for himself if he will deny this item for item on an affidavit under oath and penalty of perjury and full commercial liability. Should he not deny these items, then he has accepted it, and the jury must find that he has accepted that he set out to commit these crimes with full knowledge and forethought, with malice of intent. Online details of this slander are retained at the following link, and the link address is provided. Now on the next page is the signature page, where, as good as Aval, I have signed here on the 8th of April, and on this page is affixed the MBA stamp. We can go over here, so we can see notice to Chris Roubis, as good as Aval, my signature, the 8th day of April, and the MBA stamp attached to it. Now I had, as it says, I had intended to stamp each page, but stamping the signature page I believe is more than enough when taken into consideration also with the video reading of this affidavit. Proposed remedy and notice of intent. So I have read into the record for the consideration of the jury and the public the accusations, the evidence, and 2, the accusation that Chris Roubis has committed 2 crimes against me, and I'm giving Chris Roubis the public opportunity to decide whether he wants to make remedy for his crimes or whether he wants to try and defy the local community and commit his crimes and get away with them, or whether he wants to stand trial. So it is, to remain in honour, it is always required to offer a fair and reasonable remedy for a situation where somebody has committed a crime against you, and should they not take the remedy, then notice them of your intent to form a common law jury. So, proposed remedy and notice of intent for Chris Roubis. Chris Roubis has deliberately and with malice of forethought and intent committed the crime of slander against Principal. Principal has never caused Chris Roubis any injury, harm or loss. Indeed, prior to this criminal attack by Chris Roubis, Principal had no knowledge of Chris Roubis. The crimes of which Chris Roubis stands accused are a calculated, vicious, premeditated, continual assault on my good name for no good reason at all. Given this as a situation, I would petition the jury that reviews this case to consider the remedy you would wish were someone to perform the same calculated, vicious, premeditated, continual assault on your good name for no good reason at all. Therefore, Principal proposes as the proposed remedy the sum of 20,000 Australian dollars as damages to peacefully remedy the crimes of Chris Roubis has committed. The jury might decide to vary that remedy amount. This remains the amount that Chris Roubis must pay Principal to avoid the proposed jury trial. So Chris Roubis has until the 30th of the 4th, 2013 to decide whether to pay me $20,000. And I think $20,000 for continual slander over an extended period of time to be quite reasonable. So the proposed remedy payment is hereby made due on 2013-04-30 and can be made to peter.nolan.paypal@peternolan.com or can be made to an Australian bank account to be provided privately to Chris Roubis. Should Chris Roubis not make the remedy payment by 2013-04-30, then the due process of law will be followed as outlined below as per Principal's notice of intent. Should Chris Roubis not respond to this affidavit, a default judgment will be issued against Chris Roubis and he will have admitted his guilt by silence. In this case, an MBA Court of Law will be convened by the Men's Business Association to review the evidence, determine its veracity, consider the proposed remedy payment, and issue instructions as a properly convened court of law. The jury will decide what to do. Should Chris Roubis respond to this affidavit, then he is required by law to respond item for item. Any item he does not respond to will be considered conceded. Any item he rebuts, he must rebut under the penalty of perjury and full commercial liability. Principle notes that in Australia the penalty for perjury seems to be 10 years when performed before the International Criminal Court, and that seems fair enough to me. We shall adopt the same standard for the MBA law courts in this case, since the precedent has been set. So, linked on this page, and you can go and see it as a jury member or a member of the public, perjury. A person commits the offence of perjury if A. The person makes a sworn statement in or for the purposes of a proceeding before the International Criminal Court, and B. The statement is false. Penalty, imprisonment for 10 years. So Chris Roubis is well advised not to commit the crime of perjury. Should Chris Roubis reply with an affidavit of reply and deny the crimes he stands accused, then the matter will go to trial under the jurisdiction of the MBA Law Services. The MBA Law Services will convene a common law court operating under the jurisdictions of natural law and the common law of the land known as Australia. Chris Roubis will be offered the opportunity to avail of or deny the protection of the common law of the land known as Australia. To avail of the protection of the common law of the land known as Australia, he will accept the invitation to present his rebutting information to the jury via way of affidavit and video evidence. This affidavit and video evidence will be viewed by a jury of 12 honest men of honour and integrity who live on the land known as Australia. The Secretary of the MBA Law Court will be appointed to proceed with the court processes as and when Chris Roubis makes his intentions clear. The Secretary of the MBA Law Courts will not reside on the land known as Australia, in this case, as ASIO has attempted to harass and intimidate the man who agreed to be Secretary for a prior trial process, not this one. My apologies. The Secretary will be someone known to me and is an honest man of honour and integrity. His identity will be protected. In order to protect his identity, all paperwork will be signed by the Secretary, and then that signature will be hidden from public view. The original documents will be retained in a safe place out of the reach of any policy enforcement officers of any land. If the Australian public wanted a more transparent process, then the men of the Australian public were well advised by me to come forward in numbers so that harassment and intimidation by your servants in ASIO would not have proven effective against an elderly man who is in fact retired. It is a sad comment on Australian men that you did not extend your support and protection to a retired gentleman who had the bravery to stand up for all Australians. Now, Chris Roubis has until 2013-04-30 to make one of the following actions. 1. Admit his crimes and pay the 20,000 Australian dollars remedy payment. 2. Refuse to reply to this affidavit of accusation and thereby accept a default judgment of guilty as accused and have the jury review the evidence to determine its veracity and then to issue instructions as the jury sees fit with no defence from Chris Roubis offered. The jury instructions will then be processed according to the due process of law. 3. Reply to this affidavit of accusation, contesting the accusations and contesting the items presented under penalty of perjury and full commercial liability, noting that the penalty for perjury appears to be 10 years in jail in Australia. The length of incarceration or the withdrawal and protection of the law to be a matter for the jury to decide. And there is space for signatures. And to show you that I signed, here is my signature on this date with original document, again the date, and again my full signature on this signature page. You can be sure that it was my signature by the verification of my voice, reading this into testimony, reading this into this video. So there we have it. This is the affidavit of accusation against one Chris Roubis from Maroubra in Sydney. It is now, Chris Roubis now has 22 days to decide how to reply to this accusation. Thank you very much for listening.